So first we're going to start with on page 17 our before the match rules on equipment. So the rules are divided up like this. There are 7 rules that pertain to equipment. So as we saw before, equipment is everything teams bring to the match. That includes robots, that includes attachments, the Lego art piece, which we'll address when we get to it. So this is talking about what can you use, what are your materials. Rule 1, everything has to be made by Lego and it has to be original, factory condition. You can't modify it. The only exceptions are string and tubes made by Legos. Lego string and pneumatic tubes may be cut to length. So you can't just grab like a 2x4 stud brick, cut it and use it. You can't do that. You have to use original pieces, except string and tubes may be cut. The non-electric pieces you can use out of any set. Doesn't matter which one. If you've got like some old Bionicles, you can use Bionicle pieces because they are Lego parts. So no rule or restriction there. As many of those as you like. Now there are limitations on the electric Lego equipment you can use. So you can use either the Lego Spike Prime or the Spike Essential, the Mindstorms EV3, Robot Inventor, or the NXT and RCX sets. So I'm going to tell you right now, I would not recommend using the Spike Essential for this. Spike Essential, great product, great tool. I would only recommend it for First Lego League Explore because it does not have the same capabilities as the Spike Prime. Now, you can use the parts out of the kit. You can use the sensors that come with it, but do not use the Spike Essential brick for this competition. Now, in terms of these different devices, let's look at what a few of them look like. So this is the Lego Spike Prime. You can see it's got these buttons, 1, 2, 3 here on the front. It's got a removable battery pack so that you can recharge it. All that good stuff just snaps in. It's got a charging port here that can also be used to connect to your computer. It's got 3 ports on this side and 3 ports on this side, so you can connect motors and sensors to it. There's also another button up here at the top that you can use to indicate and establish Bluetooth connectivity. There's also a speaker, and this port that you can use to charge it can also be used to connect it directly to a computer. So that is the Spike Prime brick. You might also use the Robot Inventor, so the Mindstorms Robot Inventor. That brick looks almost exactly like this brick, except the difference is that instead of yellow, it is a teal color. I don't have documentation to support this, but my understanding is that the Mindstorms Robot Inventor and the Spike Prime are effectively the same hardware, just with different firmware and software. So they're very, very similar if you just at a glance. So this is the current generation of technology. If you're brand new to this, this is probably what you're going to use. If you've been around a while or have some older technology, you may be using the Lego Mindstorms EV3. It is substantially larger than this brick. It's much thicker. It's a little bit heavier. It's got a screen on it. The Spike Prime doesn't have a traditional screen, but let's see, mine is a little bit charged. So when it boots up, you can see that it does have this LED grid on it. So there is a screen, but it's not like this readout screen that the EV3 has. On the EV3, you'll find 4 ports on this side for motors and 4 ports on this side for sensors. So for the Spike, these ports can be used for motors or sensors. These ports are specific. The numbers are for sensors. The letters are for motors. You'll also find a port on this side to connect the brick to a computer. My Mindstorms EV3, I've got so I can get it out, the rechargeable battery pack on it, and it's got a port to charge it, but you can also just use some AA batteries. There's a few more ports on here to note. Probably, let's see, let me get my battery back in. We've also got buttons here on the screen. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 buttons. Button number 6 is right here. And then on the side, you've got a speaker. And on this side, you've got a USB port, as well as the SD slot. So that's what you have on the Mindstorms brick. So you'll see that. Looks like my screen's a little cracked, but it's still good. And I don't have the other bricks with me, but I do have an old RCX right here. This is one of the first generations of Mindstorms, and this is still legal. You can use this if you have it. It only has 3 motors and 3 sensors. Wouldn't recommend it, but if you've got it and want to try it, sure, why not? But most teams will be using one of these 2 bricks, either the Spike Prime or the EV3. My general recommendation is always use what you have, use what you know. If you don't have or know either of them, then I recommend the Spike Prime, and all of the resources that come out are going to be geared toward the Spike Prime. So you might be able to find 1 or 2 official resources, if that, geared toward the EV3. You might find a lot of third-party resources geared toward the EV3, but you will find a lot of first-party support for the Spike Prime because it is being currently manufactured and supported by Lego. So with that being said, you can use 1 brick. So when we talk about controllers, talking about those big bricks, you can use any 1 in a match. So if you've got 3 matches, you could use 3 different bricks. So you could use a Spike Prime for one of them, an EV3 for the second one, and a different Spike Prime for the third one. Perfectly allowed. But in a given match, you can only use 1. In terms of motors, you're allowed to use 4 in any one match. So on the EV3, you've got 4 motor ports. You could have 4 motors plugged into it at all times. So you can use them however you like. Now, in terms of the actual hardware, we'll switch back here. The Spike Prime, we've got a couple of different kinds of motors. This is the medium motor, and this is the large motor. I don't have any small motors, but you can read about their documentation and what they do. Put those aside. I've also got the medium, I believe, EV3 motor here, which is very similar to the Spike Prime medium, and then the large EV3 motor as well. So again, you can use any mix and match. One thing to note is that the EV3 motors are not compatible with the Spike Prime and vice versa. So you'll want to make sure you have the right motors for your technology. And then we've got sensors. So there are a lot of different kinds of sensor. There are specific ones that are allowed. The nice thing with sensors, you have no limit on these. So the Mindstorm can use up to 4 sensors at a time on the EV3, and you can use all 4 sensors. The Spike, you have up to 6 ports that could be used for sensors if you don't use any motors. And here's something that's going to be interesting. The Spike has a built-in gyroscope, so you don't have to use a port for the gyroscope. So the only sensors we allowed are force and touch sensors, color, distance, and ultrasonic sensors, and the gyro sensors. So there's 4 kinds there: force, touch, color, distance, and ultrasonic, and gyro. So if I'm looking back at my hardware, on the Spike, we've got the touch force sensor, which is that device. We've also got a color sensor with a light in it, and so there's your color sensor. And then we've also got this ultrasonic distance sensor that works by shooting out ultrasonic sound, and it'll come back and tell you how far away it is. Now for the EV3, we've also got this touch sensor, which is very similar to the touch sensor on the Spike. We've also got this distance sensor here, which is going to be pretty similar. If I can reach around over here and grab the same one, you can see they've got very similar components there. We've also got the EV3's color sensor, which is again similar to the Spikes. And then we have the EV3's gyroscope, which again, for the EV3, if you're going to use a gyro, you have to use a sensor. For the Spike, the gyro is built into it, so that saves you one there. And I do want to talk about something interesting here, disallowed sensors, because the EV3 actually has other sensors. For example, this is a temperature sensor. Technically, it is not allowed per this rule that we see here, only touch, only the different types here. So the EV3 has a temperature sensor, can't use it. The EV3 also has this infrared sensor, which you also cannot use because it is used with a remote control to remotely control your EV3. And if you look back at the guiding principles, the robot has to move autonomously. So just because they make a sensor for it doesn't mean you're allowed to use it. You are limited to these four types: the force touch sensors, the color sensor, the distance and ultrasonic sensors, and the gyro sensors. And again, you can use any number of these, mix and match, however you want within a match. In terms of what else you can bring, so you have all these Legos you can use. You can bring your Lego wires. You can have your power pack, like the EV3 has. Mine has a power pack, but I could use batteries. You're also allowed, if you want, a micro SD card. Now, the Spike Prime, I have not yet found where you could put an SD card in here, so we're gonna say no SD card there. But there is an SD slot on the EV3. And that is primarily so that you can load another operating system on the EV3 and use whatever programming language you like. If you're going to do Python programming on EV3, this is how you would do it. The Spike, you can do Python out of the box. Which leads into number 5 here. Teams can use any software or programming language as long as the robots are autonomous, no remote controllers. So this EV3 remote controller that works with the IR sensor is not allowed because it would make it not autonomous. The only equipment that is not Lego that you can bring to the table is one sheet of notebook paper. And the sheet of notebook paper allows you to make notes, how you're going to plan out your mission, just anything that your team needs to plan what they're going to do. Rule 7 is a very specific rule about Lego. You cannot bring your own mission models. Do not bring your own models to the table. So let's say that, I've got one of my experts here that is on my table as part of the mission models. I can't bring one from home and use that as part of my robot because that's a mission model. We don't want to confuse your parts with our parts and things like that. So don't bring your own mission models, and don't use the mission models as the robot or as equipment. So there are a lot of interesting pieces in the mission models, and I think some of the pieces are really useful for building your robot, but don't use entire mission models as part of your equipment because that is not allowed per Rule 7. If you see a part, you're like, man, I really like that part, sure, use it. It's just a Lego part. But you can't use a whole mission model. So these are rules kind of before you actually walk up to the table about what you need to have with you and what you're allowed to do and what you're allowed to have. So make sure you get familiar with these rules about the equipment that are allowed. Again, if you don't have equipment yet, whatever you can get is the best, and what you have resources for is the best. Strongly recommend the Spike Prime if you're just getting started, but if you're still using the EV3, that works, and it has support for it to varying degrees. So use what you know, use what you have, use what you can get tools for.